Now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who is a longtime friend, Kell. He's the Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, and as been said several times, we started this venture in the year 2000 with fewer than 50 companies, and today we have over 6,000 companies in 135 countries and over 1,000 NGOs. Yes, you can clap. He started out in the United Nations in 1987. He was tapped by the Secretary General to head up the Global Compact when it was formulated in 2000. And his leadership, I think, is widely recognized. He's from Germany, and he is a wonderful friend and colleague. Georg.
Thank you, Oli. I'm sorry I don't have sunglasses, so I also told Oli it's probably not a good idea to let me speak after Caroline, because Caroline has said so much which is so important, so I do wonder how much is there to be said. I'm obviously very honored to be among so many friends here, Notre Dame, Mendoza School, and Father Philip Braham, thank you so much for having us here for the third time, as a matter of fact, and meeting so many friends again who have been part of the journey over the past decade or so. So it is indeed like a meeting of friends and like minds. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. What I thought I can do usefully in probably 15, 20 minutes is to reflect a little bit on the past and share with you what I believe from my privileged position working out of New York and believing one sits on the top of the world, which may at sometimes be true or not. What has changed in this space where we're operating and why it has changed. And then I want to speculate a little bit about the future in the hope to motivate and energize our efforts. But the most important point is really what Caroline said. Ideas can only come to life when people are behind it, and when people put their minds together and work for a common goal. And this is really the doing of the many friends here in the room, the many corporate friends who are involved in various countries, the academic friends. I met Jerry again, haven't seen him a long time, Lee Davis, James Post, who couldn't make it, Sandra Vado, Kirk Hansen, and many others. Forgive me for not mentioning all the names. But your friendship and your like-mindedness in this journey has indeed been the thing behind the Global Compact, the only really thing. There were a few other things, so I do want to start from the beginning first and recall the fundamentals and why it's probably right to argue that the idea today is at least as relevant as it was 12 years ago when it was conceived. The link between public goods and private interests is increasingly overlapping the more interdependent the world becomes. This sounds like a trivial statement, but the bottom line is really that as we depend more and more on each other, there is a premium on cooperation. And showing in a simple way how this relationship plays out from a UN perspective, it is quite clear that the business agenda, profit and growth at some core of it, and the United Nations agenda, peace, poverty reduction, and I should have added here human rights, is increasingly overlapping in a world where corporations have gone global and politics largely are staying local. And this is the more true, the more interdependent we are through ideas, through technology, through practices. You can quote any of the examples, whether it is building markets and improving good governance, whether it is providing for security and avoid violence and reduce transaction costs, whether it is global health and the well-being of workers, whether it's social inclusion and stability of markets and enabling environment. The list goes on and on. Clearly, the public good agenda and the private interest increasingly overlap, and finding a way to engage the private sector to advance its own interest and at the same time the public interest is what the Compact had at its core from the beginning. We're very pleased that Michael Porter recently declared it the new idea, because we believe this is what we have been practicing for 10 years now. Now I want to move on and share with you a little bit the history, the 10 years of growth. Indeed, in the year 2000, there were only 41 corporations which had the courage to come to the United Nations ECOSOC chamber, where we took away actually the country plates and put the corporate plates there, which did cause a little bit of an uproar. And the number has grown indeed from 40 to over 6,000 from 135 countries. The idea has gone global. And Philip, just a little footnote here, there was one ambassador who was sitting in the visitors gallery when the compact was launched in 2000, was the UK ambassador, who spoke out with conviction and very strongly in support of the idea, basically paving the way for soft power government support, which later on turned out to be so crucially important. So what has really happened over the past decade, which is significant in that space? One is the idea has gone global. It used to be very much London, US agenda. It has moved global. Out of the 6,000 corporations now, half are from the non-OECD world. Growth is actually almost strongest in Asia and Latin America, where over 50% of the participants are coming from. So the idea has gone global. In that pathway, we have created 96 country networks all over the world, which now function independently to support the implementation of the compact by providing facilitation, dialogue, and increasingly also doing activities and projects. A second point which has importantly changed, and this explains why the curve is actually now not going upwards, is that disclosure and transparency, the communication on progress, has become a critical component of integrity and accountability. And as Sir Mark knows so well, the board has decided 3 years ago to strictly enforce a disclosure requirement, and failure to do so leads to being expelled. Unfortunately, we had to expel already over 2,000 participants, and the rate is still going up. The good news, however, is the new participants, the inflow is bigger than the outflow, and we hope that soon we will be on a growth path again. But the point here is really integrity, transparency, and accountability are components which are critically important for a voluntary initiative to continue to grow. Thirdly, the relationship between voluntary and regulatory has in the meantime evolved to a level where it's understood how the two complement each other. 10 years ago, it was seen either or and one against the other. Today, many governments and many other actors understand that you need both to work and both to complement each other. So the importance of complementarity between voluntary and regulatory is today much more firmly established and very important, obviously, for what we are doing. But probably the most important development has been that while 10 years ago the Global Compact was largely a call to more morality, to the social legitimacy, today what is new on the agenda is materiality. A growing number of corporations and investors are recognizing that many of these non-traditional financial issues actually do have financial implications, if not today, then tomorrow. The costs of getting it wrong today are very well understood, and increasingly also the benefits of getting it right. And no other point more powerful to make it than implementing the MDG, finding new business models, growing base of the pyramid models, and combining technology from the established market with the needs from the less developed markets and creating new business models. So also the opportunity side is today much better understood. Then what is also new is that educators and investors are now part of the family. Very important. Prime, and Caroline has played a key role in getting Prime off the ground, and so is PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment, something that was launched only 3 years ago, the New York Stock Exchange, which today has its home in London and is thriving at least as much as we do. And there's not a single work stream the Global Compact is now doing which does not have institutional investors, asset managers as part of the undertaking. After all, making the business case for responsible practices ultimately must be recognized by those who own and those who evaluate and assess. And I do believe that this holy grail of the corporate sustainability agenda is within reach if we can keep the course. So let me now turn on what has not changed. And this is a simplified model on organizational change developed by Deloitte for our Leader Summit, which embodies our philosophy on organizational change and has proven robustness over years and is now becoming more and more established practice around the world. And we're very proud of this, and we hope that also public institutions at some point will get more serious about it. And just to shortcut this model, and you will hear more about it tomorrow, nothing works really without commitment at the top. You need the support and engagement of the CEOs and increasingly of boards. But then this is a continuous process. It is truly a journey which has to go and be renewed on a regular basis. And so is also the requirement to communicate in a public and credible manner. So these are evolving steps of continuous performance, each of which is now much better understood, and for each step of which there is now an abundance of tools. 10 years ago, there were hardly any tools. Today, specialized tools exist that facilitate in the implementation and making it easier to accelerate this development. And what is genuinely new is that as the Global Compact has grown in numbers, it became apparent that we need to find a driver that is called quality on the front end so that quantity can be driven forward in a credible manner. And at the Leader Summit, which was mentioned earlier, we launched what we call the Blueprint for Corporate Sustainability Leadership. And this blueprint, here's only one chart of it, which embodies 10 years of experiments and working on the sustainability agenda, is meant to challenge corporations not to rest, but rather to aspire to higher levels. And all three dimensions of the blueprint are now well articulated. One does indeed refer to the organizational change dimension, including value chain. One does refer to the action component, including the MDGs, whether it's through core business, through social investment, or through partnerships with others. And the third dimension, critically important for the Compact as an initiative, is the engagement in our growing infrastructure, in particular the country networks, so that global and local cross-fertilize each other. Then I want to share with you one more thought, which I believe is an important one, to share how we conceive the evolution of the initiative over time. And I think the first years we were very busy in codifying and defining what is good behavior. Many guidances were developed, many dialogue sessions between corporate, NGOs and others were invested to define what is a good practice. And the search is still going on because the context is changing. So dialogue is still important, but as the experience passed by, a second dimension became more important, learning. Once you agree what's important and what works and what doesn't, and once you can identify and name it, you want to share it, you want to inspire as many as possible. You want it to become a dominant model of behavior so that everybody embraces it. So the learning component came in 2 years or so after the dialogue took initially off. Once you develop learning methodologies, case studies, for which there will always be a demand and an ever-growing one, but once you work with different languages, and even then at some point, more and more participants actually want to tackle the root causes of the problem and actually get into action directly, do projects, do initiatives, improve the enabling environment, collaborate in so-called collective action networks at the country level to bring governments on board, to tackle some of the basic dilemmas that most corporations encounter when they are going global. And this is, I believe, where the Global Compact is now. We are moving now into the action space, and I believe it's the most exciting one, because there the promise of having a lasting and deep sustainable impact is obviously the greatest. So looking a little bit into the future, this is really the networked governance of the Compact as it is today. There's a global issue platform opportunity covering such issues as anti-corruption, water, women empowerment, human rights, MDGs, where corporations engage in very specific issue platforms, often in cooperation with civil society, to advance the agenda through sharing practices, through learning, but also by mobilizing increasingly from the global perspective actions. Then we have the investors slowly catching up. They're still lagging behind the corporate world, I do believe, but they are catching up rapidly through engagement by establishing the case of why evaluation and assessment must integrate environmental, social, and governance issues, and soon, I hope, being prepared to give a premium and thus giving financial reward to good performance. And then there are the educators, prime, which is equally important, because if the future business generation has to be taught all over again what sustainability and responsibility means, we probably will never make it. And of course, connecting this with the country infrastructure of the 96 local networks is critically important, because at the end of the day, all action is local and all dilemmas are also local. So the key for the solutions is always found in specific contexts, and getting this synergy going between global and local is very important. I can say with some confidence now that if the UN Global Compact has an opportunity to continue to exist for another 3 to 5 years, then I do believe we have a genuine opportunity to change the global market system towards the better. We will have pushed the needle from short-term to long-term. We will have brought corporate solutions into public policy dilemmas. We will have given millions of people better conditions on the ground, protected the environment better, contributed to more enabling environment for market solution to grow. The systems are now in place, the infrastructure is in place, so what we need now is a renewal of our like-mindedness to work towards this. I do believe it is within reach. At the strategic operational level, we see 3 entry points which specify more how these aligned efforts can be channeled. One is obviously at the global market level, where the interface of investors and corporate disclosure at some point, hopefully soon, will lead to a mini fusion, not a nuclear, but a positive fusion. That I have to think much of Japan. Our friends in Japan are much affected, I must say, and we sent out a global appeal to all our participants to support them. Forgive my wrong association with nuclear technology, but a fusion between investors and the corporate world is critically important to establish the business case in a lasting manner. The other way of really bringing transformation about is at country level, where collective action with foreign and local companies together with well-intended policymakers can indeed push the needle in the right direction. So I'm optimistic. I'm also very grateful. I'm very grateful to Notre in particular. It was here that the Global Compact was first introduced in the US. It was here where important friendships and networks were first formed. It was here where the idea started to travel around. I'm also very grateful and very blessed in working for where I am, which is a complex and difficult place, but yet we have managed to create a public-private space which didn't exist before. And this was only due because enlightened government leaders have given us the opportunity to experiment and given us the trust to find new ways forward in reinventing, if you so want, the UN by leveraging its values and principles rather than in a linear manner implement top-down decisions only. So I consider myself very blessed and very lucky, and so is my team, and I do hope that this conference will help to renew some of the alignment of the spirits we need to bring this to the next level. Thank you very much.